everyone, my name is Cynthia. Let's talk books. And today I want to talk about one of the French classics that was not on the original list, but I became aware of recently, picked it up. It's a short book, so I decided to read it. It is called Bonjour Tristesse by Françoise Sagan. It's more of a modern classic. This was published in the mid-1950s at a time in which Françoise Sagan was, well, I believe she wrote it when she was 17 and then it was published when she was 18. So when the book was initially released, it made a big splash, I think in large part because of kind of those dynamics there. It is a really interesting book. Just a quick synopsis is that Cécile, our main character, is on vacation with her dad. Her mom's not in the picture. Her mom has passed away a few years earlier. And so it's just her, her dad, and her dad's mistress, basically. And then while in the middle of their vacation, Anne, a former family friend, kind of friend of the mom's, shows up and kind of disturbs the dynamics. So let's talk about a few of the themes in this book. One of the main themes, I believe, is that of melancholy or sorrow. I think it's in the title, Bonjour Tristesse. And by the way, I'm not going to write anybody's report in this video, but I did want to touch on some of these themes at least. And it shows up especially at the beginning and at the end. And I think it's driving a lot of what Cécile is doing in this story. There are quite a few references to her mom and the fact that mom has passed away and that she and her dad live a very kind of disconnected kind of lifestyle. She doesn't think that their life has a whole lot of substance and that they attend lots of parties. She's allowed to do whatever she wants. It's all about the now and like getting satisfaction in the moment. And I think it's possible to connect some of those actions to kind of the sadness of having lost her mother and not be feeling kind of fully emotionally connected to her father, perhaps. Yeah. Another major theme in here, and one that might not be so obvious, is that of sexual liberation. It is a theme that comes up. It comes up in the back of the book, and it's come up in a few other places where I've seen discussions of this book. And it's really interesting because this was published before the sexual liberation in France. And it is kind of one of my area of specialties, one of the topics that I discussed in my dissertation. So I wanted to say that there is a kind of sexual liberation here in that this is the Cécile's kind of a key summer. This is a key summer for Cécile. She engages in a sexual relationship with a local boy, but it's a weird kind of sexual liberation. It's not the sexual liberation of the 60s or the 70s, right? We're talking mid-50s, so it's a sexual liberation in which Cécile, she chooses to have sex, right? It is kind of a choice that she's making there, and there is a small discussion here about kind of birth control and are they being careful, are they not? It is a tiny little piece though. If I were ever to assign this book, we would probably take that tiny little section and really develop it to talk about the unevenness of knowledge about birth control and the unevenness of kind of sexual liberation at a time in which birth control was not widely available, especially not medical birth control. The pill does exist. It is not legal in France at the time, and it's not widely available, because it wasn't even widely available after its legalization in the 60s. So really kind of there are ways to tie in those topics in here, and if I were to teach it, I would do that. But I think it's a stretch when people say that what we're seeing here is like sexual liberation. It's not. The other thing that where I think people are drawing from to talk about sexual liberation is the fact that part of why Cécile chooses to have sex is as a kind of rebellion, because her life is getting restricted by this new woman in her life, and that's a kind of mother figure type, but she enters the lives of her and her father and immediately starts setting rules and starts kind of having an effect on their life. And for her as a teenager, she feels it as largely restrictive, right? In fact, there is a section in here in which Anne straight out says that she's too young for sex, right? So in a way, Cecile is kind of reacting to that by saying, hey, I hate you. You're wrong. I'm not too young for sex. I'm going to go out and have sex. It's kind of interesting because Cecile's whole attitude throughout the whole book is really rather meh. Like, she is introspective. She, I think, understands that this new woman in her life can have a profound effect. She can have a profound positive effect, but she doesn't want it, right? And it's not just like this woman's going to take away my father's love. No, it's this woman's going to change my whole life, and my youth, or the youth that her father is allowing her to live, in which she doesn't have a care in the world, will come to an end, right? So that's the other major theme here, I think, is youth. And another kind of major theme I would connect it to if I were teaching this book. Youth is a really interesting topic in the 1950s because we're talking about a generation that comes of age in the decade after World War II. So there's very much a need to escape the seriousness and the heaviness of the generation that lived through World War II, right? Those people were burdened by this global war. And so the generation that comes of age in the decade afterwards kind of wants to distance themselves from that. At the same time, the 1950s is really the time in which the teenager in Western Europe and in the US really develops as an important demographic, an important economic and social demographic. In France, a lot of the reaction seems to be of oh, what? What is this new demographic here? What do we do with them? We think they're kind of dangerous. So there's a bit of mixed feelings. A lot of especially conservative commentators have a very negative view of youth, which is not going to be an abnormal kind of reaction to youth. I think that happens probably every decade with older generations looking back at young people and thinking these are just a bunch of hooligans, ruffians up to no good, and we should keep a tight control of them. But that is very much something that is happening in the 1950s, and it's really a rather new phenomenon in global history. So that's it. Overall, I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars. I think it's a really interesting book, but I think a lot of people would hate it when they read it. In fact, I'm thinking if I were assigned it, people would hate it because Cecile, our main character, is rich, white, privileged, and she hates her life. And so she really is not likable. Her father's not likable. Anne, who's kind of the character that brings reason into the story, is also not likable. And what ends up happening, without giving any spoilers, is what happens when a lot of people of privilege get into trouble. And I don't think a lot of people are going to be running out to try to read this book. But if it interests you, I do recommend it. It's quick, it's short, it's a really fast read, especially for a book that deals with some really rather heavy topics, but super easy to read and fast. So if you've read it or if you plan on reading it, let me know down below, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!